right, good morning everyone. Happy Wednesday. So I'm gonna take some time and go over some information that you'll need for the Hunger Games questions for today, Wednesday, April 22nd, as well as do some modeling of how to set up your response so that you're successful. I know we've been doing a lot of these forms lately, and I've been seeing a lot of very short, very simple answers, and today I want us to be more thorough in our writing. So the first thing you're going to see on Wednesday's question page is that for questions 2 and 4, you're going to use a 4-part structure. You're going to make a topic statement, you're going to answer the question, which is like writing a thesis, then you're going to have evidence from the chapter in your own words. I'm not asking you to go find textual evidence in this response or in these responses, and then an explanation of how the evidence proves your answer. So your answers are going to be multiple sentences, and in those multiple sentences I expect spacing, punctuation, capitalization, especially with names in the beginnings of sentences, to be grade level appropriate. You guys are going off to high school pretty soon. So start with your name. Question 1 is a multiple choice question. I'm going to go ahead and skip that. Question 3 is also a multiple choice question. Again, going to skip that and focus in on question 2. Question 2 says, it's a chapter 7 question. It's a passage analysis question. For this question, it's essential that you watch the lesson video linked in the directions. That's this video, so you're good. Write an explanation of how the training conversation with Peeta and Haymitch shows an internal conflict in which Katniss is both confident and insecure. Use information from the chapter in your own words and the response structure provided at the top of the form. That's this. Okay, so to get us set up, I'm gonna move my camera over here like this so that we can look at the same thing. And I have chapter 7 printed so that I can annotate it, and you can use my annotations to support you. So to start off with, I'm gonna skip ahead in chapter 7 a few pages, and I'm gonna go to page 89. So if you are looking at the text online, I'm looking at page 89. And make sure that you can see this. Okay, great. So it says, Katniss, I already know you're handy with a knife, says Haymitch. Not really, but I can hunt, I say, with a bow and arrow. And you're good? Asks Haymitch. I have to think about it. I've been putting food on the table for 4 years. That's no small task. I'm not as good as my father was, but he'd had more practice. I've better aim than Gale, but I've had more practice. He's a genius with traps and snares. I'm all right, I say. So I'm going to pause there and make sure you can see my paper. And I want to acknowledge the competing feelings that Katniss has in this section. So first, Haymitch asks, and you're good? And she doesn't respond right away. She says, I have to think about it. So the fact that she stops to think about it, I'm going to draw a line out to annotate, to me suggests that she's not comfortable speaking confidently about herself, which shows that she has some insecurity. But then she says, I've been putting food on the table for 4 years. That's no small task. So she follows it up with a thought about how no small task equals I'm doing a tough job. But then she follows it up with a comparison. She says, I'm not as good as my father was, but he'd had more practice. Again, that suggests that she's got some insecurity acknowledging that she's good at something. Then she follows that up with, I've better aim than Gail. So again, a confidence, like, oh, I'm good at this. I'm better at it than Gail, but I've had more practice. So she attributes that skill to practice, which is important, but she uses that practice as a way to undercut her confidence. And then she continues to praise Gail. He's a genius with traps and snares. And she settles with, I'm all right. So we have a back and forth between an insecurity and a confidence in this thought process she has about herself. And then Peeta takes over and he says she's excellent. My father buys her squirrels, and he comments about how she always pierces right through the eye and never the body, which makes it a cleaner and easier animal to prepare for eating. So then she says, this assessment of my skills from Peeta takes me totally by surprise. First, that he ever noticed. Second, that he's talking me up. What are you doing? I ask him suspiciously. So we have one, insecurity represented, because why would she's asking, why would Peeta even notice that I'm good at something? And it's supported by this suspiciously. She is suspicious of anyone complimenting her. So a suspicious of a compliment suggests insecurity. All right. And then that's where it gets funny. It says, I don't know why, but this rubs me the wrong way. So it totally puts her in a bad mood that Peeta complimented her. And then we have the back and forth continue on the next page. Let me make sure this is focused. Where she says to Peeta, there's always hand-to-hand combat. All you need to do is come up with a knife and you'll at least stand a chance. If I get jumped, I'm dead. I can hear my voice rising in anger. So she's comfortable complimenting Peeta in a way that undercuts herself. But oddly enough, this is following her complimenting Peeta confidently. She's like, I've seen you tossing around 100-pound bags of flour. I snap at him. Tell him about that. That's not nothing. And he can wrestle. He came in second in our competition last year, only after his brother. So she confidently compliments Peeta here. So that means she's complimented her father, Gail, and Peeta, all in ways that undercut her own skill. So she's got a confidence in her thoughts, in her assessments of skills, but she doesn't have confidence in herself. She's got insecurity. And finally, it ends with, she's behind the bakery and can feel the chill of the rain running down my back, the hollowness in my belly. I sound 11 years old when I speak, but only because someone helped me. And she's referring to that experience after her father died, when Peeta threw her the bread that saved her and her family's life. But again, she doesn't acknowledge that it was her thoughts and her skills and her knowledge that she learned from her father that really saved them, because once the bread ran out, she started hunting and gathering and feeding her family at a very young age, just 11 years old. All right, so that should help you with chapter 7 question passage analysis, which is question 2, where you have to explain how in this chapter, Katniss shows an internal conflict in which she is both confident and insecure. All right, so I'm gonna put that to the side, and we're gonna talk about chapter 8's question for a moment. Bring the camera over here. So the chapter 8 question goes like this. Again, you need to watch this video and you need to use the support structure at the top. But this one's a little bit simpler. Write an explanation of how Katniss ended up with a score of 11 out of 12 from the Game Makers. Okay, so bringing this back over and focusing, I'm going to show you chapter 8 and then I will let you get started. So chapter 8, it happens after she shot the arrow at the Game Makers and stormed off, and she has a little bit of a breakdown, and then she gets kind of sassy at dinner. I love this part. This is one of my favorite developments in the whole book, where this is the first time that Haymitch calls her sweetheart. So she says, "And you, sweetheart," says Haymitch. Somehow Haymitch calling me sweetheart ticks me off enough that I'm able to speak. I shot an arrow at the Game Makers. Pay attention to the use of the sweetheart from Haymitch throughout this book. It gets real special. All right, so then they talk at dinner, and after dinner, they go to sit in the TV room and watch the televised announcement of their scores. So it says District 12 comes up last, as usual. Peeta pulls an 8, so at least a couple of the Game Makers must have been watching him. I dig my nails into my palms as my face comes up, expecting the worst. Then they're flashing the number 11 on the screen. 11! Effie Trinket lets out a squeal and everybody is slapping me on the back and cheering and congratulating me. But it doesn't seem real. There must be a mistake. How could that happen? I ask Haymitch. Guess they liked your temper, he says. They've got a show to put on. They need some players. They need some players with some heat. Katniss, the girl who was on fire, says Cinna, and he gives me a hug. Okay, so in this section, we have a couple of things to acknowledge for your answer. One is that Peeta pulls an 8, so at least a couple of Game Makers must have been watching him. So that is part 1 that I would put in my answer. So if Peeta is able to pull an 8 for his self-described kind of pathetic performance, that means the Game Makers were watching more than she thought. So I would put that in my answer to explain. And then when she says there must be a mistake, Haymitch says, guess they liked your temper. They've got a show to put on. They need some players with some heat. So in part 2 of my answer, I would put that the Game Makers expect Katniss to help make the show more interesting. So I would use those 2 bits of information from the text as part of my answer, and then I would get into my answer structure. So we have 1, a topic statement. That's where you talk about Katniss and Peeta getting scores from the Game Makers. And then 2 is the answer to the question. So Katniss is able to get an 11 out of 12 for 2 reasons. The Game Makers were actually watching, and they expect Katniss to help make the show more interesting. Then you provide evidence from the text in your own words, and then explain how that evidence supports the answer that you got. And then you'll have an excellent response. I'll be in Blackboard Collaborate today from 11:30 to 12:30 if you need anything, and I expect to see some great answers. Have a great day, guys.